welcome to Joy on Paper Live. I am the guest host today, BRIA BURTON, and I am thrilled to bring science fiction author Jeffrey A. Carver to the show today. Jeffrey, welcome, and thank you so much for coming on to Joy on Paper Live. His book, Sunborn, was one that I had the privilege of reading and reviewing for the radio show, and now here we are at Joy on Paper Live chatting with Jeff about his entire Chaos Chronicles series. And I am so excited to share that he is the Helicon Award winner this year, I believe. He might have to correct me if it was this year or last year, for the Frank Herbert Lifetime Achievement Award for science fiction, which is a huge deal. And Jeff, thank you for coming on. It is such an honor to talk to you and see you face to face this time.
Hi, Bria. It's great to be here. I will correct you on the date. It was 2022
Yes.
that I received
2022.
That
Thank you.
Yes.
Yes. But no small award there. That is an incredible honor. And it's a privilege to talk to you and be able to see you. So
Thank you.
let's talk a little bit about backing up into the past. So you've been writing since the 70s. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I started publishing in the 70s. I've been writing
Publishing.
since before then.
Yes, publishing
Yep.
since the 70s. And so you bring so much wisdom, so much longevity to this genre.
That word
You know,
longevity. Okay.
I do. I think of you as one of the sci-fi greats that we have today to be able to look back through your catalog and even what you have that's more modern. And it's so fun. I love your high action, high stakes, a little bit of Star Trek type sprinkled in your space opera stories, and some of the just delightful characters that you've come up with over the years. So you
Thank you.
bring a lot to us today, and I'm so excited for the listener and the person watching here on YouTube to get the chance to hear from you. So I'm going to go into your own personal story a little bit, because on your website you share that you've had a little bit of a scuba instructor in your history, a pilot. You've got a lot of stuff in your story that sounds a little bit Indiana Jones and adventurous. And so do you mind sharing with us a little bit more about just what your life has been and how that ties into your creativity as a writer, as a sci-fi writer?
Sure, I'd be glad to. I grew up in a small town in Ohio on the shores of Lake Erie, around boats all the time. Being on open water was a big part of my growing up. Still have a small sailboat made of styrofoam that I bought when I was a kid, and have
How
since taken
cool.
my kids out on. Yeah, I always, even as a kid, I wanted to fly, and talked my way in high school into. We had a paper airplane contest, and I somehow managed to get two local pilots to agree to take the winners up for a plane ride. And that was my last chance to ride in a small plane until much later. But I did years later, after I was married, got my private pilot's license. I never really had a chance to use it as much as I would like, because it's a very expensive sport, and expensive sports and writing don't necessarily go together too well.
Understand.
But when I was in college, I took up scuba diving as part of the Brown University Scuba Club, and I really loved underwater exploration. And it had a very science fictional feel to it. I had read science and loved science fiction since I was able to read, and being able to be underwater in what felt like a very different world, especially night diving. You have eerie lighting around you. You can turn off your lights and wave your hand, and plankton sparkling in the water. And it's just a wonderful kind of simulation of being in some science fictional otherworldly existence. So I love that. And I ultimately got my instructor certification. But it didn't really serve me as a career goal, so I did that for a while. Focused on the writing as the years went by, and here I am.
Yeah. So once that first book was published, was that just a straight shot journey to just book after book? Were there bumps along the way,
There
maybe?
was nothing straight shot about anything in my
Okay.
writing career.
Okay.
No, I had managed to publish a couple of short stories, and there was an editor named Terry Carr who was very renowned at the time for an anthology series he edited called Universe. And I had submitted some stories to him, which he had graciously turned down. But one of the rejections came with a note saying, I've worked a deal to edit some books by new writers for a new publisher. Would you be interested in writing a novel? And I hadn't even thought of graduating to writing a novel at that point. And I thought about it for about 2 seconds and
Mhm.
sat down and started typing out an outline for a novel that had not existed anywhere in my imagination until that moment.
That's
And it
incredible.
took off from
Yeah,
yeah,
that he
it
was
took
the
off
one
from
that really spurred you to do that.
yeah, yeah. It was helped by his saying, I can get you a contract in an advance. And I was like,
That is
whoa, yeah.
helpful. Uh,
Because all I knew at that point was very low pay rates for short stories and very slow payment. I think I was still waiting for the payment on the two stories I had sold at that point. That turned into my first novel, Seas of Vernath, which drew a little bit on
say
my
it one more time.
the Seas of Vernath,
Mhm.
which was set in what is now the Starmaker universe. At the time, it was just this world that I had created in one short story. And that is on an ocean world, and a lot of the activity takes place underwater.
Which doesn't
I,
that just tie with where you had just been?
Let me use what I knew.
Yeah. Yep.
And when I set out to do a second novel, I took one of the short stories that had been published in Galaxy and expanded that into a novel. And that kind of that got me an agent, and that got me moving along the way toward publishing career. But many bumps, many publishers folding under me or folding their science fiction imprints under me. And I was with Dell Books. I had books published by Blue Jay Books, which unfortunately did not survive as a publisher, Bantam Books, which did not survive as an imprint, Tor Books, which published the first um, four of the Chaos Chronicles before we had a parting of ways. And now my last two books I published myself, which wasn't at all what I had envisioned doing or intended to do, but that's the way life took me. And I've always been a slow writer. So over these many years, I've written far fewer novels than many of my colleagues have in a similar period of time. The last, it's a pair of books called The Reefs of Time and Crucible of Time, which are the most recent in the Chaos Chronicles. It was actually written as one book, The Reefs of Time, but it was so long. It took me 11 years to write, and it was such a long book that I broke it into 2 volumes for publication. But it's really a single story. If you want to check it out, you don't start with Crucible of Time because that starts you in the middle of the story. You start with The Reefs of Time.
And the
Yeah.
way they're laid out, you explain that like in the subheading. It's part one of two, part two of two.
Yeah, I gave the duology a subtitle of the out of time sequence just to try to help people who are struggling to understand the numbering of the books in this series.
Yes, yes. And I've gotten the opportunity to chat with you on the
Mm-hmm.
radio show about these books. I just absolutely adore them. I adore going back
Thank
to
you.
them.
Thank
I adore your narrator, Stefan Rudnicki, who, oh
you.
my goodness, I could listen to him read anything. He just has one of those voices.
Yeah.
So you really, I don't recall now if we talked about this. Was he someone that you found, or was this Tor originally publishing your book? They found him for the audiobook?
No, Tor actually never scored me any audiobooks at all. Um,
Ah,
I had some years ago turned into an audiobook lover as a consumer of books. I
mhm.
discovered that I can listen to books while I'm out walking the dog every day. And
Yeah, yeah.
I encountered Stefan through his narration of other books. He's done all
Mm.
this Orson Scott Card stuff and
Yes, that's
a
when I
ton of
first
people.
heard him, I think, as well.
Yeah. So I actually reached out to him just out of the blue as far as he was concerned, and said, would you be interested in doing any of my books? And he asked to take a look at one, and he said, yeah, I would like to do this. But he often works with Blackstone Audiobook Publishing, and they set up a sort of standard publisher deal for Neptune Crossing, the first book in the series, and did that. And it didn't really sell very well. It's book one of a series, and the other books were not available. So a couple of years went by, and they weren't showing any real interest in licensing the successive book. So I actually, some funds became available to me. So I actually hired Stefan to narrate the rest of the Chaos books myself. And it was great working with him because he has a great creative sense. He has a theatrical background as well as having a wonderful reading voice. And he did the remaining books of the series, and I hope he'll be able to do the final one when and if I finish it.
Oh, yes, we'll get to that. I do want to talk about that.
While we're on the subject of audiobooks, a number of my other books are in Audible produced by narrators hired by Audible. It was just a straight licensing agreement. And I didn't have any input on that. And I'm not as satisfied with some of the readings as I would like to be. So I'm exploring the possibility of pulling those books and hiring new narrators. I haven't quite decided what I'm going to do about that yet.
Because you do have quite a back catalog. Do you know the number of books you've published since the 70s?
I think it's 18. It kind of depends on how you count. I have 2 collections of short stories that I put together in ebook format. I think that brings it to I forget, but it's around 18.
Which is okay, because it's the great thing is you did mention Star Rigger Universe. That is your website, is starrigger.net.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's where, if anyone wants to check out all these incredible book series, the Chaos Chronicles being one of your more recent series, they can go see them there. And I wanted to bring up the Etsy shop that you have. Tell me, what led you to create an Etsy shop as an author? I don't know that I've seen that before I saw your shop.
Actually, I was searching for a way to, as I was bringing my older books back into print in paper format, I wanted a way to make books available to readers, autographed books available to readers. And what with state taxes and all that sort of thing, it just seemed very cumbersome to try to do it from my own website. So I cast about, and somebody said, look at Etsy. And there are actually other authors who have their books on Etsy. I'm not really a big shopper on Etsy, so I just went exploring, and I set up a site, and from time to time, people will order autographed books from me. And it's a handy platform for that. But I don't think it's necessarily the most ideally suited for selling books, but it works. And until I find a better one, and when I say better, as if there's something wrong with it, Etsy's a great operation. They make it very smooth for people to do this. So hats off to them. But that's why I have an Etsy shop.
Okay, yeah, I was curious about what had led to that. And I do love that personal touch of the autographed book, because now essentially you're not publishing this book that you're working on potentially that will become the end of the Chaos Chronicles series. That's not something you're working with a publisher or an agent.
No, not now.
So meaning, like, if you want to get it out there, you figure that out. You decide, how am I going to put it out there? Where is it going to be available? That is all up to you as now essentially a hybrid author, which is what the latest term is for traditionally published authors that also do independent publishing.
Yes. Nothing is set in stone. Nothing is ever set in stone in this business. So who knows? Right now, it's difficult to imagine that a publisher would want to take the 7th book of a series that they don't hold the rights to. Most likely, I will put this one out myself. And after that, who knows?
But
it's not like go ahead.
Things change so rapidly, not only in this industry. So I appreciate your caveat there to say, well, we'll see. This is probably what'll happen, but we'll see because you never know.
Yeah.
That's all part of science fiction. What is coming for us, and how are we going to explore new technologies? How are we going to treat people with these new technologies? Those are all the types of things that come up in good science fiction that I have to just talk about your book some more. So this is the one that I have in print. So I'm going to have to get on Etsy to get the rest of the series. I have them all on Audible as well because I
Mm.
just can listen to Stefan tell me the stories over and over. And so Sunborn was my introduction because for some reason, and I shared this with you when we first chatted on the radio last time, for some reason I didn't realize it was book 4. But you
Yeah.
have this incredible craft to bring a reader in the middle of your series. And I know you weren't, that wasn't your intention to have somebody come in, but it was a byproduct of your craft that you were so, you weren't giving all these info dumps. You were just bringing us into the next chapter of the series and saying, okay, here's a new character, here's where we're going. And there were little tidbits sprinkled in when we would learn some of Bandicut, the main character, John Bandicut.
Mm-hmm.
We would learn what was happening. I, as the reader jumping in the middle of the series, would learn, oh, okay, so he has this going on because of a past, something to do with saving Earth. And that was actually a huge part of the first book. So
Yeah,
most readers who got to this book would know, yeah, that's what John Bandicut did. Saved Earth from this comet. But me, I had no idea what his backstory was until those little tidbits were sprinkled in. But they were done so deftly that I didn't feel like I was lost, and I didn't feel like I was getting bogged down in those details. I just was
well,
enjoying the story for the adventure and for all the fun characters and the aliens coming together with their different gifts to solve problems. It's delightful. I love the series.
I love bringing aliens together to solve problems. It's been one of the most enjoyable parts of writing this series. And I'm glad
Yeah.
that worked for you. There had been a gap of years between books 3 and book 4, so I knew I needed to bring the reader up to speed. And then there was an even longer gap before books 5 and 6. So in that case, I actually sat down and I wrote synopses of the first 4 books, which is at the beginning of The Reefs of Time. It's not in the audiobook version, but it's in the ebook and print versions.
So that's okay. Yeah. So that's something that I can get in the print version. The listener, the watcher can get in the print version or ebook version.
Yes.
And when you put these out, okay, so you had the first 3 with Tor, and then moved into the hybrid of publishing the books 4, 5, 6, 7. Am I counting correctly?
No, 7 is not yet written, not finished.
Okay, so stopping at 6. Okay, so 4, 5, and 6. So how did you make decisions about, am I going to put this as an ebook, as a print book? Was that just a given? Were there any things that you learned going from traditional publishing to indie publishing that could maybe benefit those writers listening who might be interested in that?
By the time those books came out, it was a no-brainer that it would be an ebook.
So we're going to play a book buzz that I did for Sunborn. And there's a video that goes along with it now. So we're going to go ahead and play that for those watching to enjoy and listen to the book buzz to hear all about what journey you'll be taken on through Sunborn.
Hello, fellow sci-fi readers. This is author BRIA Burton reporting for Joy on Paper with your science fiction book buzz. Today's communique to galaxies near and far includes a 2020 release in audiobook. Sunborn by author and Nebula finalist Jeffrey A. Carver. Sunborn is book 4 in Carver's The Chaos Chronicles, and Skyboat Media produced this audiobook with stellar narration by Grammy and Hugo winner Stefan Rudnicki. Sunborn is also available in print and ebook. Now, let's download the book buzz. In this highly imaginative space opera, Sunborn picks up where the previous installment left off, with John Bandicut and his alien companions traveling in a star spanner bubble towards a way station for what they'd hoped was much-needed R&R, but instead they're alerted to impending interstellar destruction from hyperspatial gravity waves of unknown origin. Stars in the Orion Nebula are dying, and an AI at the way station tasks this collection of capable compatriots with averting cosmic disaster. Aboard a space and time manipulating ship called the Longview, Bandicut and his crew encounter otherworldly beings and multidimensional travelers. Yes, your mind will be stretched. For hard science fiction fans, this book may be a bit far out, even according to the author, but dabbling in fantasy, in my view, enhances the reading experience of this exciting story. Intriguing character dynamics, non-stop action, and point-of-view shifts that include bringing readers inside the mind of a sentient and singing star are just some of the elements this fantastical tale has to offer. Author Jeffrey A. Carver has been publishing science fiction since the 1970s, including the novelization of the Battlestar Galactica miniseries on Sci-Fi Channel. This is BRIA Burton with your futuristic fiction fix, signing off.
Okay, so that was the book buzz to get people excited about reading your series.
And that was a great surprise when you presented that to me. I love it.
Yes. So Patsy, the host of Joy on Paper Live, I'm just the guest host, but she created the video. I did the audio recording, and then she turned it into the video that was made. Yeah, I just had so much fun reading those books. And you started to talk a little bit about moving from a traditionally published author to an independent author. Let's explore that a little bit.
Before we do that, can I just say something about what you just said about your enjoyment of the book? Because from time to time, and I'm sure many writers experience the same feeling, you start to wonder, is it really worth it? We live in a really uncertain and crazy world. And sometimes you think, you're telling stories, flights of the imagination. Is this really meaningful in this world? And then you'll hear from a reader, or somebody will say something like you just said, Bria, which makes you go, yes, you have touched another human being with your story, and maybe a lot more who didn't write to you or speak to you. And you've managed to make the world a little better place for that. And yeah, it's worthwhile. It is so worthwhile.
I'm glad you
Thank you
said that, because that's all part of, writers do need to hear that from seasoned writers, I believe.
Yes.
I think that's going to help them too. And especially, you come into these stories, I think, in such a place of awe and wonder when you described your scuba diving of the earth that we happen to live on, that in my view was a created earth. And so to have what you're creating move someone, just like what you saw in that water moved you and made you think,
Yes.
this is like sci-fi, but I'm living it. That's what you've done. You've brought that kind of awe and wonder to the page. And that to me is something that can really stir in readers, something of their own imagination, their own amazement, and even their own humanity of, how am I treating other people? How am I reacting when these things maybe in my life go wrong? And I just want to thank you for your contribution.
Thank you for being such an appreciative reader. It means a lot.
And so hybrid publishing, what does that mean for you?
So
how
the
can
hybrids,
listeners who are writers maybe learn from you?
Very simply, it means that you're participating in traditional publishing as well as self-publishing.
Yeah.
Maybe an alternation, maybe at the same time. Everybody has a different model for doing it. And I would say that for a new writer, there are some clear advantages to traditional publishing, which is that an established publisher like Tor can get your books into bookstores everywhere, and you get a lot more market penetration as a new writer in particular who needs a publicity machine to make people aware of you. That said, there are some self-published writers who have just exploded out of the gate. and and it goes both ways. Andy Weir, who wrote The Martian, self-published initially, and then it was picked up by publishers and then by the movie industry. It really can work in either direction. A great advantage of the self-publishing model is your own marketing and publishing. So that's not a great advantage. That's an additional thing you have to do. But the financial model is a lot better for you because you get most of the royalties instead of the publisher getting most of the royalties. And you get it by direct deposit once a month rather than every 6 months, 2 years after the royalties are earned. You also have a lot more control over doing things like running specials, book club specials, audiobook specials, creating your own audiobooks. There are a lot of rewards to doing it yourself, and there are a lot of challenges to it as well. So it's a two-edged sword, and I don't think that any one model is best for everybody. I think you have to figure out what's working for you and follow that course. And it might change from one year to the next. You might find that what worked last year isn't working so well this year. So try something different.
And let's talk a little bit about the book that you're currently writing. I've read the 6 books in the series, and then the duology that is the Reefs of Time that currently ends the series, even though the series is not necessarily completed.
Yeah.
And when I finished book 6, I thought, oh, that's it. That's okay. That's all the adventures. I can just go back and reread them when I. And then we talked, and you explained, actually, I'm working on something. So let's talk about what is it exactly that you're working on. Tell us about the process and what's happening with that possible final book.
It's hard to talk about because I've been struggling with the book a lot. Book 6 ended really in a pretty awkward and difficult place. And I was always intending to jump off from there to continue the story and bring it to some semblance of closure. I don't outline in great detail before I write. I like to discover the story as I go. And it's
You
not
and I
even
relate to
that. Yeah. It's not even exactly a preference so much as that's the way my brain works.
Same.
Yeah. And in this case, the discovery process has been a kind of difficult one. Sometimes I feel like I'm in the wilderness trying to figure out how did I get here and where do I go to get back to my story that I thought I knew where it was going, but maybe I didn't really. And some more new characters and some old characters probably circling back to become important. It turns out, I don't know how I can talk about it without explaining a bit about the background, which is that Ship World is this enormous habitat outside the galaxy, at the edge of the galaxy, housing many thousands of species. And it's we don't really see how it's governed or what makes the place run in these earlier books, but it turns out that there's a fair amount of discord in the governance of Ship World, and this is having an impact on our company of characters, and they want to know why, and so they do some digging, and there's pushback, and there may in fact be a civil war potentially brewing in this place, and I don't know how it's all going to play out. I'm still trying to discover how that's going to play out. Yeah, there I am. I've had some struggles with writer's block along the way, and it certainly slows me down. I think it's starting to move a little bit now, more than it was 6 months ago. I'm making headway. I'm gradually finding pieces that fit the puzzle and saying, oh, this is the direction we want to go, or, oh, I just put 3 wrong pieces in this part of the puzzle. So I got to back up and do things differently. I will say that if you think that as the years go by, it gets easier and easier, it doesn't. Well, I shouldn't speak for everybody. It gets harder because you keep wanting to challenge yourself more and more. With each successive story, you want to try something a little more challenging and more difficult to pull off. And you find yourself sometimes wondering, did I bite off more than I can chew? That's what makes the game fun.
And your story is quite complex. The series is quite complex. It is multiple point of view characters. Our main character is certainly John Bandicut. I think that would probably be what anybody reading would get that pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And he's human. So that's pretty much why we get to follow his journey meeting these aliens, and what their stories are comes into it, often through his filter, but also then we do get point of view from their perspective. That was one of my favorite things about Sunborn, was that we got the perspective of the star, and
Yeah.
perspective of Deep, who is a character that Deep and Dark are two of my favorite characters, and they're almost
Ah.
indescribable because they are, I won't do them justice. They're floating out there in the cosmos. You can see them a little bit. They're almost like, I hate to say space whales because that simplifies it way too much. They're way more complex than that.
Yeah. They're probably in intelligent singularities, but we don't really know for sure what
Yeah,
they are.
yeah. And they have these incredible, whatever the laws of physics that govern them in their bodies and their abilities is just the complexity of your story. Essentially, they are needed at certain points to help solve problems that John Bandicut and his friends cannot solve without them. And
Yeah.
I love that. I love the complexity of where the story goes, some of the seemingly dead ends. But as a discovery writer, you might have been sitting at that dead end going, how am I going to get him out of this one? And I imagine
How
that has,
did you guess that? Yes.
yeah, I have a little bit of experience with being a discovery writer myself. And to hear you share now the writer's block and just wanting to challenge yourself, wanting to tell the best story that you could possibly tell to finish off this incredible series. I have to tell you, I appreciate the time you're taking. I'm glad you're not just spitting out words like, okay, people want this, I better get it out there.
Mm-hmm.
And who cares if it's not as good as the last one? I think the care and attention that you're taking shows in each succeeding book, each book that comes next. So I will eagerly wait, but I can wait. I can wait. I want to read it when you've got that incredible, wonderfully complex, emotionally resonant story that's going to be coming out. So I can wait for it, certainly. And
Well, I appreciate that. Before Reefs and Crucible were done, I had a reader who would contact me every couple of years and say, I'm in my late 80s. I don't know how much more time I have. Please let me read the next volume of this story. And that was so encouraging.
sweet and endearing. And I'm sure that didn't give you any kind of, oh gosh,
No
like I feel
pressure.
horrible. No pressure. I see that as such, she just adores, or he or she adores your
Yeah.
stories and wants to see what happens if she can get the chance in this lifetime. I'm in my 40s, so I say I can wait. None of us are promised tomorrow, though. And I
That's
thank
right.
God for the days and years that I've had. But I will say, as a writer, hearing your journey as an award-winning author, you've won this Lifetime Achievement Award, and you still struggle with writer's block. I think that's going to really impact people that watch and listen, and for writers who might be at the beginning of their journey to say, okay, this is what this looks like. It doesn't mean that I'm suddenly just going to become this machine. I'm actually
Right.
going to continue having these struggles. Things will come up, obstacles, because our journey in life is all part of what makes us good writers, I think, and learning how to overcome obstacles in life.
Yes, and a couple of things about that. One is, I was going to say, the imposter syndrome is not specific to new writers or new people in any endeavor. You can have been doing it for decades and still feel some days like, who am I fooling? I don't know how to do this. How have I managed to fool people all these years? But also, the ups and downs, the trials and vicissitudes of life, it plays a big part in your writing life as well. Sometimes it provides raw material for your stories. You might have to wait years before you can fully digest it. But it can also be an impediment to your writing because, things happen in life, and you get setbacks, and you might have medical setbacks and things like this. And all of that is something you have to contend with as a working writer because, well, you're a human being like everyone else. And you sometimes get the feeling from, if you read reviews, people saying, why can't this writer finish this series? And it's not a churn it out process. And you probably wouldn't care so much if it were a churn it out process, which brings up the whole question of AI and how that's going to be affecting writing and publishing. I know that the publishers are already struggling with stuff coming in the slush pile that's been written by AI.
Yes.
And I really don't know where that's going to go. I played with Chat GPI. What is it?
Chat GPT.
GPT once to try it out, and I asked it to write a little profile of me, and it came up with all kinds of fictitious stuff. And I thought, this is really not the most intelligent AI I've ever seen. I don't. I guess some writers have found that it can be useful as a brainstorming kind of technique. I'm suspicious of it. And even though I write intelligent AIs in my stories, this is not intelligent AI. This is not really AI. This is some precursor to true AI. And I am kind of staying away from it.
I so appreciate what you're saying here. I have the same suspicion. I have the same, nope, I don't like it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't like what we're seeing. I saw an article that there are literal people that are creating some of these language models are teaching it to lie. So the fact that it could not tell the truth when it created a bio for you doesn't actually surprise me, but I wouldn't have known that had I not read that article. And I don't understand what would be the purpose of teaching it to lie unless you would like the machines to rise up one day. I can't fathom the purpose behind that because Copernicus and Napoleon are delightful AI machines in your story that I love. They're characters that I love in your story. And
They
so,
would
yeah,
never lie.
no. And that's what's so neat is what they're more human than
There
in
was
that.
an interesting sequence in Strange Attractors, the second book of the series, where one of the robots, it's unclear whether it has been infected with an alien virus of some sort. So, how to sort out whether you can trust that it's real self or has it been changed was an interesting storytelling challenge.
Yes. Oh, and these questions that now writers who are up and coming, they're exploring these things. It's very interesting to see. And I would love to see these writers explore it with their own writing, not with Chat GPT exploring it.
Yes,
So
yes.
I'm with you on that. I would love to see what writers, real writers, think as they explore it in story. Yeah, I don't find much value in what's being churned out from those right now, and it's hard to say where it will go. Same comment, I'm not sure either. I think it's a little bleak from what I am reading, and I do hope there are some, maybe some backpedaling even, but it's hard to say with giant corporations over these things.
Yes, yes.
But we can still write our stories. We can still do our part to, like you said so beautifully, make someone else's life a little bit better by bringing a story and shining a light in this sometimes dark world. So, Jeff,
Yeah.
thank you so much for coming on to Joy on Paper Live. I'm
Oh,
so sad that we're out of time, but I don't think this has to be goodbye forever. I think we might have you back as your journey writing this last novel continues. I would love
I
to
would
see
be
you back
glad to come back. Love
and
talking.
you're going to point everybody to your website. I'm going to point the correct direction. There we go. starrigger.net right below your photo there. And
Oh,
anyone
let me
who's
just throw out that I will be attending the Science Fiction World Convention in Glasgow
in
in a little
Glasgow
over
is
a,
Scotland.
little over a week, 2 weeks from now. Yeah.
Oh, that
So,
sounds amazing.
any
Okay,
of
so
your viewers happen to be there, look me up, please.
wonderful. And so thank you again, Jeff. And I just want to say, Get out there, writer, get writing. Reader, pick up his books. Writer, pick up his books too. But also, readers, pick up his books. You are going to love the adventure, the heart behind all of it. And Jeff, have a great rest of your day, and we will talk to you soon.
Thank you, Bria. It's been a pleasure.
You're so welcome. Bye-bye now.
Bye.